Okay, with my first word, my time will begin. Hey everyone, thanks for joining this first Constructive Speech and Debate podcast. This is a podcast for everything speech and debate in Texas. Our names are Ryan Stokes and Kenny Adcock, and we are excited to continue this journey with you as we begin to work through the season. It is our goal to share some stories, introduce you to experts, and facilitate conversations that we hope will help you throughout your season. So whether you are a coach, student, competitor, or a parent, trying to figure out what crazy event your student participates in, welcome to the show. Today we are joined by Cody Morris. Cody is currently the head coach at Chapel Hill High School in Mount Pleasant, Texas. He has formed and coached highly competitive programs throughout his career that have produced state champions and highly successful national runs. He is also the creator of the new extemp resource, Pocket Coach Academy, which I'm excited to use with my program this year. Before we kick off the main topic, I just want to congratulate Cody on an amazing season last year. Your student walked away with more gold medals in one year than most do in their whole career. So with that being said, we've got an awesome coach on here today to help talk to us about extemp and how to be successful. So I'm actually going to pitch it over to Kenny real quick. Kenny, tell us a little bit about the UIL extemp events. There's informative and persuasive. Break them down for me.
Well, before I do that, I think it's commendable to acknowledge that at one point we were all three in the same district.
Yeah.
The competing against you guys has helped make me the coach I am today. So I really appreciate that. And, you guys have answered questions and helped mold me from, the no experience competing against you guys. So thank you for that. Cody, congratulations, man. Like triple crown. You've also, kind of helped me, get the gumption to go to my principal and my superintendent and ask for one of those UIL state championship rings. So looking forward to adding one of those to my own, cabinet.
All about it.
So I have the pleasure of talking to you today about informative and persuasive extemp under the UIL umbrella. And honestly, they're two of my favorite events because I don't think we have a more well-rounded event, maybe next to Congress. But they operate pretty similar. Informative, you get a topic, and your job is to educate the audience. You get 30 minutes prep, no internet, because UIL is still holding on to that with some good reasons. And I think Jenna and Miss the extemp contest director really have some good logic as to why they're still holding on to that to really set UIL apart. So I absolutely respect and understand that. Informative is 7 minutes. It's pretty straightforward. Cody's the extemp expert, so I'm going to let him kind of expand a little bit more as he digs in throughout this episode. I'm just trying to give you a brief overview. Persuasive, you take a stance, right? Typically, they're hot button issues in the news media. Cody, your first episode of your Pocket Coach Academy just went out, and I want to commend you. That was a great resource. I watched all 13 minutes of the video, started looking at some of the articles. Thank you for making my life a little easier. And look,
that's the goal.
What your academy is going to produce this year. Before I pass it over to you and kind of let you talk about the TFA and NSDA events, I want to remind people that Pocket Coach Academy, if I'm understanding correctly, is not just an extemp resource, but for people like me at the small school, it's for coaching, a coaching resource. I think a lady on Facebook just recently posted about that. And I want to commend you for commenting on there and mentoring and helping grow the community, just as you did me whenever I started this journey 8 years ago now, which feels like just yesterday. But all of that aside, we'll talk more about that throughout the episode. I want you to kind of dig into domestic and foreign, the TFA NSDA extemp events for me, or for our audience listeners, and really talk about those and maybe compare some of the differences from UIL to TFA and NSDA events.
Yeah, I mean, I think from a personal coaching standpoint, and just to touch on joining you, I really feel like I didn't mentor you much because I was always competing against you. And, I didn't want to help you too much, but yeah, it's been awesome to watch, all of us come up and grow as a unit, from none of us having any accolades to now all of us having, students finish high in the state tournament, and so it's been a lot of fun to just grow with y'all. But so basically, when you think about domestic or international versus informative or persuasive, it's all one and the same, except for if you're in domestic, the only qualifier is that the questions are going to be about domestic topics. State the obvious, but informative, persuasive, the questions are going to be worded, informed, formats that the questions are to inform or to persuade. So, if you're in domestic or you're in foreign, sometimes you can draw a informative foreign topic or a persuasive domestic topic. But in reality, most of the questions are going to be formatted the same and asked in a similar manner. And obviously the content is going to, be time frame sensitive. So when I think about just coaching differences between informative and persuasive for the UIL circuit versus TFA / NSDA domestic and foreign, I really think it lies more in style and a couple of nuances in the structure, but they're going to want a little bit more of a performance inside of those circuits inside of NSDA. If you watch NSDA Nationals, you get a lot more humor, you get a lot more expressions, a lot more movement. It's got a lot more stage presence. It bleeds a little bit more into a platform event than UIL Extemp. They're going to want structure on top of structure on top of structure. And it's going to be a fluency competition of who can nail the structure the most fluent is the way I kind of view UIL. Now, obviously, a good smile on your face and some poise and charisma doesn't hurt, and it goes a long way. But, I think back to watching a lot of Christy Hodgkins's extempers, and they were, they were never the most charismatic, but they would just kill extemp competitions, especially at UIL, because they were just so well versed in the structure and the content and so fluid, and so they didn't put on any kind of show, but they would always, she would win extemp state championship after extemp state championship. And, that's really where I've modeled it from. So if I'm going to say that there's any differences there, I think it lies in two areas, the AGD and the intro, of where the NSDA is going to want you to give us a little bit more story, give us a little bit more passion, give us a little bit more emotion, get into, more anecdotal type of attention getting devices, get a little longer into the background, do a little bit more song and dance when it comes to framing and posing the question. Whereas UIL, we've won a state championship every time that we won a state championship, we have used a quote as an AGD. Simple quote, quick hit, check the box, move on. And we focus a lot heavier on the body point and content in there, and be really heavy in the content, and less focused on the showmanship or the kind of personalized areas of the extemp structure.
Okay, awesome. That was super helpful. Just add in a few more things that you might need to know about extemp. Times. In UIL, you've got a 7-minute hard stop. Do not go past that 7 minutes or you risk disqualification. Okay, where in your other events, you get a little more of a buffer time that allows your student a little bit more of an opportunity to be successful in how they conclude their speeches. Another thing I want to cover is how rooms are created. Okay, you might be at an invitational one day and you're looking at the postings and you're like, okay, so we've got 18 kids competing. Why did they choose to break it up this specific way? Okay, and my best advice to you is this: your tournament director is going to, one, consider how many judges they have available for the event in that time slot, and then two, they're going to try to fit it as best they can in between a minimum of 5 and a maximum of 8 to 9. Okay, so however they can break that up to give the closest easy breakout to the next round is how they're going to do it. So quick example, quick hit. I have 16 kids. Now you could do this one of two ways. You could break that into 2 rooms of 8, or you could break it up into 3 rooms where you have 2 rooms of 5 and a room of 6. Both of those are completely valid ways to do it at your tournament if you're hosting one. It depends on how many judges you have. Okay, so if you're ever wondered about how they kind of choose rooms, it goes along that mindset of how many judges do I have? What's going to create the best break to the next round, which means are we breaking 3 out of a room or 2, and then giving the best shot to students. Now, I think Cody did a pretty good job of telling the differences between UIL, TFA, and NSDA and kind of what they're looking for, but are there any key rule differences that you could highlight for us?
I mean, the main one is going to be, I mean, I guess there's two, and I expect one of them to change pretty soon. But the first one and key one is that you only get three topics. You only can draw three topics inside of TFA or an NSDA sanctioned competition. So whereas UIL still allows you to choose five and pick one out of the five slips, then TFA and NSDA only let you draw three. So everything else is pretty much the same except for drawing those three topics. And then the rule that's kind of in flux is internet access. NSDA, TFA allow internet access in the draw room. UIL has slowly, it seems like every year, added internet to competitions. You know, policy now has it, LD has it, Congress has it. Extemp is still a no-go for internet access, so that is still a key difference in there and something that can get you in trouble. Now, both of them are still against any kind of prepared material. And so, you know, the standard issue that most students run into is, you know, debate briefs, their policy or LD, and they pull up their policy evidence for the year and try and use that in their speech. That's a no-no because it's considered prepared material. So I'm sure that that a lot of coaches have had a student disqualified for an infraction like that. I know I have. But other than that, everything, the rules are pretty much the same. Structure is pretty much the same. And, you know, now the judging differences are the unwritten rules, but yeah.
All right, awesome.
Which, Ryan, one thing that I really want to make sure gets highlighted is the time difference. That UIL time difference is finish the word or sentence that you're doing. Because there were several state qualifiers that their speeches were 7:05, 7:7, who were in the finals round, and who were finalists. I'm sure that's 7:0, but that finish the sentence is a dangerous mark. I think you're putting your fate in the hands of the judges at that point, and that is just a risk. I would hope I try to encourage my kids not to take. They don't always listen. Sometimes they are that 7 minute, that last word was just the most powerful thing I was going to say. And then TFA and NSDA, I believe it's a 10-second or a 30-second window, Cody.
It's a 30-second grace. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that 30-second window, you're absolutely right, gives a little bit more competitive leeway and gives a little bit more like clean cutoff rather than this sentence was, 17 words and this sentence was 30 words. I think there's some gray area in the UIL rule book.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, my favorite speech time is 6:50. We coach and we work and practice and we try and hit 6:50. If we're 6:45, okay. If we're 6:55, okay. But we're shooting to get out of there at 6:50. I tell my kids, if it's got a 6 and a 5 in the front, then you nailed that speed. Your time management was perfect. And there's some nuance and tricks in how you get kids to be able to hit that kind of small window that we'll put in our videos, but we won't have time to discuss that in today's episode.
Well, that kind of takes us to the next phase, right, Ryan?
Yeah.
What are those key things, right? Knowing when to give a successful extemp speech. You kind of talk about the 6:50 window. There's some things that I really want to give you the chance to highlight. Again, I'm really excited to partner with you and PCA and your Pocket Coach Academy. I think that's an incredible resource, and I can't say that loud enough. For those of you that haven't gotten into it, I definitely think our friend here is doing a great job with this resource. So let's kind of break some of the speech components down. I thought the document you shared where it was like these are the core check boxes that we really want to make sure we're hitting was revolutionary. I'm sure that's you and Christy, and all the brainchilds of the East Texas extemp world coming together, helping you kind of construct that. But I thought that was incredible. So let's start with the intro, right? Like, what are the things that you recommend in an intro that really have to be there to check those boxes?
Yeah. That self-evaluation ballot was just something that kind of, when everybody kind of puts things in your head, Christy, they teach you all this stuff. And then you realize that you don't have time to listen to 100 speeches in a week. If you got 6 kids that you're trying to give 2 speeches a day, it's at some point you have to empower your students. And so try to put all of the, foundational stuff as much as you could into a reasonable checklist so that students can, either check the box or not. Did you do it or not? Then you can get into the nuance of how well did you do it, right? I think, and that's kind of where I go back to that checklist and why I am a huge believer in that. If you watched any of the videos, that check the box method. I mean, that is how I teach extemp and how I approach extemp. And I always use the example or the analogy of cooking, of a recipe, right? If you leave out ingredients in a recipe, it's not going to taste good. And the same thing, if you leave out pieces of an extemp speech, it's just not going to come out as well. It might be edible, right? We might be able to consume your speech, but it's not going to be as enjoyable as if you had included all of the ingredients. And so I really want, and I that's the initial approach when I try and take a kid from never giving a speech to giving a complete speech, is just break it down step by step, section by section. Obviously the intros first, and I don't mean to kind of preface that whole section, but just go down the list of ingredients and make it a recipe. And and just like your grandmother never had to look at her recipe for chocolate chip cookies ever again because she made it so many times, that's how our extemp speakers should be. Is they shouldn't have to look at the checklist any longer after they use it enough, And so, in the intro, we break down, I think I consider it seven checks. One of them has got a kind of a stipulation in the middle, but you obviously have to have an attention getting device, which is just like, if you're starting out and you're beginning, or if you're competing in UIL, just use a quote. I know that there's so much room to get fancy and to do a lot of stuff. And I just feel like I've tried to go, a more difficult route and get a little cute or really prep and come up with some good AGDs. And then it just feels like we end up taking from somewhere, we're borrowing from somewhere else, whether it's our draw prep time or our attention to content or just practicing, certain things. And it just doesn't seem to pay us back. It's not a good ROI or return on investment as far as time and energy are concerned. So we use quotes, and, and 100% honestly, Luke Nichols, my extemper from last year, he had a little, quiver of 10-ish, maybe less, honestly, 5 to 10 quotes that he had in his back pocket that he used on the regular. Now some topics he couldn't find one that fit good, or if it was a big speech, then he might really, laser in and find something that works even better. But I think you can find simple quotes, especially starting out, going from, going from bottom of the room, getting the 6 to just getting the 2 or the 1 at invitationals, using a general quote like, there's nothing to fear but fear itself. Like the potential link to topics from something as simple as a quote like that is very vast. And so I would recommend that. I know I'm probably going to go over time here, so let me move quick. But you got to have the the link to background. Once you introduce the topic, you want to cast a wide net, get to their audience. Don't jump right into the content. Bring it back to the topic. Then give us some background. Always frame it, and I think of it and I preach it as, why are we even asking this question today? What do I need to know? What has led up to, what important events have transpired previously that have led to us asking this prompt, this question? And so if you can answer that question in your background, then usually you're going to have a pretty good section of background in your intro. You got to, one thing that a lot of people don't do. Oh, go ahead.
And coaches, I cannot and students, if you're watching, I cannot stress how important that is. I don't know how many rounds I've sat in and judged of extemp, and what separates your top 1 and 2 kids in the room are the ones that give background context knowledge for why we're looking at that question. So if you're one of those kids that finishes 3-4 in a room, or you're a coach that you're just on that break line all the time, have your kids start doing that background to provide context to the question, because you never know what kind of coach you have in the back of the room or judge in the back of the room judging that round. They may know nothing about the content that they're about to listen to for 7 minutes. It's so important.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that's your first chance to start flexing your muscles and flexing your knowledge. And a lot of times that background, it shows up in your preparation. You know, if you've been giving practice speeches and you've been doing extemp all year, and the background gets a lot easier because you've been following the Russia-Ukraine war, and so you can really give context to why we are in this, you know, situation now. You know what's happened throughout the year. And then, you know, as you get out of your background, there's one big thing that I think separates, even in the 3A state finals, watching it. Luke was the only one, my student was the only one that did this. And, you know, I can't prove it, you know, 100%, but I think it was one of the separating factors of why he won a state championship, was that he gave a significant statement. And it's such a small piece, but it is a huge framing mechanism, and it's something that really ties in and can be used throughout the speech to really take it up a notch and bring it up a level. And just talking about why the judge would care about the answer to this question then gives you that framing for when you're proving and showing your answer inside the body points and answering the question with warranted analysis. Now you can reference back to the impact that this has on the judge, or, you know, the whatever kind of context the question has. But usually you can relate it back to something the judge would care about, you know, the economy or our future, you know, the youth of our nation or something. You know, it doesn't have to be fancy, but providing a significant state, framing the question, then that makes your posing the question a lot smoother, instead of you just dry running into the question, you know, out of the background, and to be like, so now let's ask a question, right? It says, you know, with this, you know, with the health of our nation on the line, we must ask ourselves, yada, yada, yada. And so that is something that a lot of people don't do. And as long as it's a rarity, you know, people that do it, the students that do insert that, they're always going to have that extra umph on their speech, that extra thing that takes them above the competition. And if you watch any of the videos that are available at Pocket Coach, you'll see where you can use that further. But pose the question, preview the points, nothing special there. In fact, I would say that less is more inside of that area. Just say the question exactly as it goes, answer the question with an umbrella answer. And the way I explain that to my students is, if I was just to ask you what this question is, what your prompt is right here, give me your answer in a sentence. Give me your answer in a thought. Don't give me your answer in a 3-point bulleted format. Give me an answer. What's the answer? Okay, then prove that answer right 3 times, right? Don't give me 3 answers, or don't give me 3 different answers, or don't give me the same answer 3 different ways, which a lot of times students do to try and stretch out a single thought into a 7-minute speech. But give me the answer, and then give me 3 reasons that answer is correct. I know it sounds harder, but whenever students grasp that concept, the speech writing actually gets a lot easier, because now you don't have to answer the question. You just have to prove the answer to the question correct. And so you almost kind of branch off the question and open up this whole new realm of content that you can use to fill your speech up with. And so inside body points, I know I'm probably running a little over time here, but inside of your body points, you just want to follow a microstructure of it's twofold. It's evidence, analysis, link to answer. So here's what the draw data says, the content, the news source that I'm quoting, as it says, or paraphrased. You don't have to get too complicated there. Then give me context for how to apply that, right? Here's the raw information. How do I want you as the judge to apply that? And then show how that application proves that answer that I gave you is the correct answer to the question. And so do that on top of itself with a little bit of nuance, in the idea of that I'm going to give you kind of, if we can get into debate terminology, kind of the link or internal link aspect of this argument. If the argument is that the economy is decreasing because of inflation, right? And then I give you dry data that says inflation has gone up by 10% in the last 12 months, right? Just raw data. So clearly 10% in 2 months is a significant increase when you think about the impact that it has on families. And that and decreasing the amount of spending power by families of 10% would drastically hurt the economy, like bring it back to the answer. Then I can build off of that of like, when we take that money out of the economy, now it impacts small businesses. Source that out, and then I could impact that into an economic scale, and I'm not even talking about inflation necessarily more, but I'm talking about the impact that inflation has had inside the economy. And then you can kind of really flow your speech down that way. And I think that once students grasp that, their speech writing, if you're having kids that are having trouble getting it done in 30, when they start following that little microstructure inside of their body points, the speech writes itself so much easier because there's only one direction for that point to go. And especially if they're debaters, it's really easy if they're already doing policy or LD and they can kind of follow that thought format or that chain of thought that disads or advantages or contentions follow. And then in your conclusion, this is where I was talking about you really want to, or where you can really flex and teach kids how to really hit their mark. Our conclusions, we want to be starting right at the 6-minute mark. That's our goal. That's kind of our flag of like, are we ahead? Are we behind? And so we know to kind of go conclusion long or conclusion short. And really all we do in the conclusion is when we transition from the conclusion, we use that significant statement again. So we're going to go out of the third body point. We're going to say the significant statement one more time. So instead of providing like in conclusion or or some kind of format of like, so to conclude or something along that manner, we're just going to say, so clearly with the economy hanging in the balance, we must ask ourselves, we repose the question, and then we answer the question in the idea of post tense. So something that very few do is they don't have any differentiation between the way they preview their points and the way they conclude their points. And there needs to be a pre and post tense differentiation in how you deliver that information. It's the same information, but you need to differentiate the way that you deliver that. And then you can do that and flex that 15 to 30 seconds inside that. Do we just give the chapter title of that preview point, or do we give the point thesis? And so there I have a 5 seconds on each point that I can extend or collapse and really flex into, okay, am I at 6:30 and I'm into my point previews? Well, then I'm going to go, long. And then I've got 20 seconds to do my point previews and I can extend it out. Or am I already at, past the 6:30 and I haven't previewed my points? Well, then I just give quick hitters and I hit my callback, which is a callback to your AGD, and I'm out. So inside that preview to points, or that review of points, if you will, right? I'm not even using post tense and I'm talking about it. That review of points, you can flex and really manage that last 30 seconds well, so you can hit that 650 mark and don't have to stress about the 755 or the 705 or finishing under 630. I think that's kind of the mental mark that a lot of judges have, is anything over 645 was a 7-minute speech. That's how I look at it. And I think a lot of people are kind of in the same boat. It's like, they don't care if you hit 7. If you're under 630, okay, you didn't manage your time, great. If you're, at 7:05, you didn't manage your time, great. If you're somewhere around the 6:45 range, that's perfect.
Yeah. All right. So moving into our last part that I want to talk about, our 2 state champion holding. Wait, Kenny, did you get a state champion in extemp this year?
No,
just
I finished in 6th.
Hey, that's still a medal. Y'all did better than I did. We got there, but I don't think we made day 2. So what I'm going to ask y'all to do is, do you have any drills that you have your students do? Give us like 1 or 2 apiece. And then how do you teach time allocation in the draw room? What do you have your students do? Kenny, start us off.
So one of the big tools that I use is Flipgrid, right? Like we do a lot of speech recording and do a lot of peer review because, Cody, you hit on it early in the episode. I'm one person and I have a pretty large team. So, listening to 15 to 20, speeches throughout the week, sometimes 2 a week, doesn't exactly allocate time management for me. So Flipgrid has become a pretty vital tool. And then I'm actually going to incorporate your checklist this year. I'm going to add it because normally what I would do is I'd have them fill out a ballot and give some critical feedback on what their classmates saw, and they would do it in Flipgrid along with posting a ballot. But this year, I think I'm going to incorporate your checklist. And for our listeners, I'm going to take that document. Cody, if it's not public, if you'll send it to me, I'd like to link it to our YouTube channel so they can have that access as well.
It's published for free on our website. You just got to click free resources.
Yeah, so I'm going to link that out to our listeners. Anybody can get that. And I'm going to use that because I think your checkbox system is absolutely the most simplified version. I'm going to tell you, I think Christy would be real proud of, you putting that out there, and really, putting that resource out there for other coaches. One of the things that I do for allocation is I do the 20-10 as well, right? I teach my kids to take 20 minutes on prep, and then, take 10 minutes on practice. I tend to actually encourage them to kind of give themselves 7 minutes, because that 3-minute walk to the room, you can kind of use some space there. And if you're on a campus like Pine Tree and the, basement that the extemp rooms end up in, our students can get lost. So that's part of the process, is knowing how to navigate your campus that you're on, or, UT Austin while you're at state, because the buildings can get spread out. So those are two of the things that I really tend to emphasize is, just, practice. Like the more speeches we give, the more content we're in, the more sources we're familiar with, because sometimes Extemp Genie isn't exactly your friend and it doesn't always provide you the sources you need. So the prep that you've done beforehand is where you really pick up some of those things. Extemp Genie is a great tool, but, sometimes it doesn't always have the files you need for the specific topics you draw. So those are a couple of things that I do. What about you, Cody? How do you win a state?
Yeah, I agree 100% with everything you said. I think the 20-10 split is great. And then, you get that extra 3 to 4 minutes on the walk there to keep going and work it through. All in agree with that. The one thing I would say to add value, and not in disagreement with it, but to when the drills or the approach that I take that may be different, and I can't say that it is different, but that might be different than other coaches, is I will sit on a piece of, like, we'll start and we will just learn how to write an intro, and I will sit on that intro until they can give me a complete structured intro, without a note card, without anything. And we will do that, and then we'll take that same intro, we will have one topic, and we will beat that topic into the ground. And it's not, maybe there's some improvement for this, but we'll write an intro, and then they will get to where they can give that intro, and then we will write a body point on that, one body point, and then we'll give the intro and body point, and we'll keep going until we can give an intro and one body point. And then we'll do 2 body points, and then 3 body, and we will slowly add in all the way into a conclusion. So the kids hate it. I'm going to tell you, they hate it, but they can get from nothing to a complete checklist speech so much quicker, in my experience, if you just hold the line and make them finish a section or gain, complete understanding of a section, in due time. So if that's probably one thing that I do differently, is I don't do the whole speech at once. I don't care if we go to a tournament. If you only know how to give an intro and one body point, you're going to go into an extended speech and you're going to give one intro and one body point. And the next tournament, we're going to try and have an intro and 2 body points. And even though starting off, we're not going to do as well, in the long game, when we actually get to district and we get to region and we get to state, we don't have to go back and try and recorrect. We don't have to go back and try and fix bad habits, or, them going into tournaments and winging it and getting comfortable in that type of format or that type of delivery. And so, so that's one thing that I might do differently than some coaches, is just really just hold the line, and take a very slow development process. But I think that in my experience, that slower is actually faster when you actually want to get to the finish line, a state championship being the finish line. That if you go slow at the beginning and really focus on that development of hitting the structure exactly as it's meant to and building on top of that, then you actually can get to the top level a little bit quicker than trying to, go forward and backwards and go forward and backwards and correct and add and correct and add. So.
Okay. Oh, there's a timer. If I had to give a speaker rank for everyone in this room, I would say Cody first, Kenny second, and myself third, because I absolutely stumbled through our intro on this episode. So thank you for joining us for the first Constructive. And once again, thank you to Cody Morris for joining us to talk about Extemp today. Make sure you check out his amazing new Extemp resource, Pocket Coach Academy. I could not advise a better thing to just put into your tool belt for this year if you're looking to get better at Extemp. Join us for next week's episode on Congress featuring debate coach Melissa Witt. Thank you.